strong pinky groove. If you have the skirt, things get a little bit out of control, but by having my hand be able to get under the clay, it helps maintain control. If you're dealing with cutting up yourself, make sure that there's no clay on the wheel head. I pulled out the biggest chunk of metal before. I apologize for this situation with the metal. But you're all stronger for it, I guess. So what I'm gonna do to cone up is I wanna push in on this kind of donut that I created using 3 points of contact, whatever that is. If it's this hand or this hand, it's up to you. For me personally, I'm using the heel of my left hand and the fingers and the heel of my right hand to push in. And you're not pulling up, that's where you can rip the clay off. So you're pushing in, and in a way, if I just pushed in and I let go, you can see there's like the donut just moved up. And so I'm gonna move my hands up and push in there. And move my hands up and push in there. And that is the basic idea, that you are not pulling up, you're just pushing in and the clay is moving up. Going down, I tilt it forward ever so slightly and the clay naturally wants to spiral downward. I'm using the pad of my thumb.
Oh.
And then once you get a little bit lower, you do need some downward pressure. And again, that pad of the thumb just translates to like being on top and pushing down. So again, I get in, I push the clay up, this is how it looks all together. Tilt it forward, push down. The other hand is just helping keep it under control. All right, so it's close to being centered, but it's not perfectly centered. I need to kind of just make a mold with my hands. There's a couple different ways. I just learned a new one where you like hold your thumb and push down. That's new. That works. I do the same idea, but I'm using one hand here. So there's downward pressure and inward pressure. My hand is still, the clay is moving into the mold, and it's still, because it's planted, all of the muscle is kind of stiffened up or tightened up. So you know it's centered when there's no wobble in the clay. If I look at my fingertips, they're not moving at all. And then once you know that it's centered, you can move on and drop the hole in the center. And doing that, now we need to start thinking about the shape that we're creating. For me, a closed form usually is like a cylinder, so I want a flat bottom. So I will do that. I'll make a flat bottom. And so I like to keep my one hand just resting on the outside as a brace for this other hand to kind of sit on. I'll push down and follow that quiet spot, the center. And if you feel like you're getting off center, you can pull your hand out a little bit and then go back in and find that quiet spot again. So I've gone down to, I don't know, it's about 1 centimeter of clay down there. If you feel like you don't know, again, you can use your needle tool and push all the way down to the wheel head, but here, and ride your finger down to meet the clay and pull it up. I can keep going down. That's a lot of clay. So I'm gonna go down a little farther and fill in that hole. And now I wanna open this up. When you are throwing, so at this stage, we're really thinking about the inside shape. For those of you who got a chance to trim last time, we were matching the outside shape to the inside shape, right? That was our goal, to make the walls nice and even. So it's like I'm visualizing the entire form, but I'm concentrating on what that inside form is, because the outside form we can trim away all the extra clay later, but we want it to match the inside form. Does that make sense for everyone? Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, I want my bottom to be nice and flat. I'm gonna pull this open towards myself. Having one hand here to pull into is a little helpful so that you don't pull past the base of the diameter of this. If you pull past it, you most likely will flop. So I'm pulling towards myself at 6 o'clock, slowly adding pressure. If I add pressure quickly, I'll knock it off center. And so I'm slowly adding that pressure, and I'm slowly releasing that pressure too, with the same idea in mind. If I let go quickly or abruptly, it will knock it off center. So I've opened this up to the diameter of the inside shape that I want, that's about like 3 inches. Again, remember everybody, your clay, your pieces will shrink in the kiln. So if you want like a nice, I don't know, big coffee mug, you gotta make an extra big coffee mug. If you want a little espresso cup, you might make a regular sized coffee mug. I swear you'll be surprised by how much it shrinks. So right now I'm going in and out. I'm following a single line from the outside of my disc, the bottom of my pouring vessel into the center and back out. This is compressing the clay. I'm counteracting the centrifugal force that the wheel is exerting on the clay. It's the wheel by spinning is pulling my clay outward naturally, and I want to counteract that by pushing clay back into the center, because otherwise this center point's the weakest spot and you might develop an S-crack in the firing. So I've compressed my bottom, and now I want to, one thing I like to do, which I don't think most teachers teach, is I actually like to try and just re-center this ring of clay here. And it's just like compressing the lip where you have 3 points of contact, inside, outside, top, except I'm thinking about this whole kind of donut ring of clay. So I'm using like my whole hand to compress. And I'm not necessarily like squeezing, I'm just letting the clay run through my fingers, and you'll feel like any kind of discrepancies in thickness even out. I hang out here until it feels nice and even. If anyone wants help with that, I definitely can work with you all individually. But I think for me, it's super beneficial, because if you dropped your hole a little bit off center, or as you opened it, your pressure wasn't consistent, you will have at this point already knocked it off center. It will make your life difficult later. So by compressing that ring of clay, you're just preventing or helping yourself down the road. Okay, so we're throwing basically a cylinder. That's what most pouring vessels are. So again, to get this clay right now to kind of move upward, I need to push in on it. My walls on the inside are pretty much straight up and down, so I really need to get the clay on the outside to go up. So I'm going to use my inside hand as like a backboard or a wall, and that's the one that's stiff. It's not actively pushing, it's just stiff, and the hand on the outside is actively pushing. Connect your hands, have your fingers lined up, and push in. So this first pull is really just trying to get your clay evenly distributed, because before it was kind of like a lump and then another lump. So I'm trying to get my walls evenly distributed so that my next pull will be a little easier. Notice it's kind of tornadoing, like funneling outward. To counteract that, you can just squeeze it in a little bit. That'll help you later on too. All right. Whenever it feels sticky, make sure you add more water. But again, too much water is going to oversaturate your clay. If you ever have a puddle in the bottom, make sure you soak that up. So now I'm going to spend a couple rotations down here at the bottom and get underneath the clay. And you can see it happening probably on the other side too. And then I want, as I push in on this kind of ring of clay that I created, and move my hands upward, I want to stay underneath that ring. You don't want to skip over it. You want to stay underneath it. So what that looks like, pay attention. I'm using my middle finger really as my main pusher. I'm pushing up on that hand on the inside. My inside hand is slightly higher than my outside hand. But I'm staying underneath that general lump of clay. And my clay is pretty soft, so it's easy for this to get out of control. At the top, I hung out for a couple rotations and then I compressed my lip. If it feels like it's kind of growing, just collar it in. Make sure your hands are really wet. Okay, so it's a little tacky, so I'm going to add water. We don't want any stickiness. I'll do it again. I'll get underneath the clay and push up on that. Ooh, that's soft. Okay, so now we're talking about closed forms. Closed forms are jars, vases, and maybe your pouring vessel is a slightly closed form. You don't need like to have a jar or a vase as a part of your table set, but this is how you would make them. I'm just trying to even my roll out there, but pushing up against the flatness of my rib. All right. So just like how I collared in the top of my vessel when it felt like it was getting out of control, that's the exact same way you close in a form. Don't go to the very top, that's really hard to close in your form. You want to get just maybe like an inch down and start closing in your form by collaring. As you collar it in, you're compressing the clay and it's becoming thicker, so you do have the opportunity to take that thick clay and throw it a little bit higher. And this is how you would make a tea spout too. You can get this really skinny. Sometimes I like to lay my finger over the top. What that's doing is compressing at the same time as collaring. Notice I'm collaring and throwing that clay as it thickens up. But once your spout is this tiny, you can't get back inside. So you want to make sure the rest of your vessel is the shape that you want it. I can get my fingers just about down to here. If I wanted to make this a tea spout, I would continue going, making it skinnier and skinnier, raising my walls. Then at a certain point, you can't even get your finger in there. So you need to use your needle tool as the inside kind of your backing. And that is how, if you wanted to make like a tea spout, how you would do it. And then you would cut it like down here. So this is like a vase or a tea spout or whatever, but if you wanted it to be a tea spout, actually I'm going to just take the slip off. Makes handling it a lot easier. And like I kind of gunked that up, so you can use your needle tool to clean this up. Maybe I want it to be extra crisp, so I'm going to just cut off the very top. And then I cut it down here. Remove this guy. And this is like for a teapot, what you would attach to the other piece, right? So you would cut it later when it's leather hard. You come back and cut it at an angle like this. This is not how you do it. But when it's leather hard, you would cut it so that it would stick to your pot like that, right? You could do whatever you want. So that is a closed form. And again, so I'll just take this now. And another really fun thing to do is do a completely closed form. So you're basically making a balloon of clay. And this is one way to make a jar. So I'm going to close it up all the way. So again, I'm going in between collaring and then throwing that clay because it's getting thicker as I collar it in, as I compress it. of completely closing out the entire form.
So collaring is it when you make it narrower, and throwing it is
Height, getting height. So this is a closed, completely closed form, which now I've trapped the air inside. If you want to just fire this alone, make sure you put a little hole in it so it doesn't explode in the kiln. This is, you just made a little shrapnel bomb. But one way to make a jar is you take this guy, let it get leather hard, and you simply just cut on an angle, like into it, and put a little handle on it. And this becomes the lid, if that makes sense. It has to be cut on an angle, just like when we were talking about lids before. If it's cut straight, it'll just fall right off. But if it's cut in on an angle, it'll sit in the form, or like the walls will kind of move and not fall off. So, and there's a lot of things you can do with these. They're so fun. This is also how you would make a slump mold for hand building if you wanted to.
A slump mold?
A slump mold. Like you could take this, fire it, and you could have this slump mold, which then I could take a slab of clay and lay it on top of it.
I gotcha.
And the clay would just drape over it. And
Gotcha.
that's one way to like incorporate hand building and throwing.
Cool.
Because
Okay.
I'm just making a tool.
Right.
It's now a tool. So, yeah. If I wanted to take this thing off the wheel. Then when you're removing things from the wheel, try and remove the slip. Get your hands clean. Hands, and you can just lift it up as long as the slip is removed. Yeah, like the tackiness of the pot will be fine. Because it is that kind of more cylinder-like form versus a bowl that you use your fingers to get underneath. Yeah. It's like another way to make lemons. So, yeah, that is how to use closed forms.
Cool.
That's kind of the last form. Some people are asking about plates. I'll do that now.